My wife's secret affair turned into a cult obsession. She left me and our kids for energy alignment with other men. I tried to save her, but hey Reddit, I need some advice. I never thought I'd be the guy posting on one of these forums, but here I am. My name's John, and I've been married to Emily for 15 years. We've built a pretty good life together, or at least I thought we had. Some quick context. I work from home as a software developer, which means I'm around the house most of the time. Emily, on the other hand, is a fitness trainer. Our 2 kids, a 13-year-old daughter named Madison and a 10-year-old son named Alex, keep us busy. Life was running smoothly. We had our routines, our shared interests, and despite the typical ups and downs, I always believed we were solid. But over the past year or so, things started to change. Emily began acting different. It's not that she was a terrible wife, at least not at first, but she became more irritable, snapping at me for the smallest things, and seemed distracted all the time. When I'd ask what was wrong, she'd say, "Oh, it's just work stress," or "I'm exhausted from all these new clients." I wanted to believe her, but something didn't sit right. We always had a pretty active bedroom life, so it didn't raise any alarms when she started going to the gym more often. But it wasn't just her gym routine that changed. She started going to these late-night workout sessions, and out of nowhere, she signed up for these weekend fitness retreats. When I asked why she suddenly needed all these retreats, she brushed it off, saying it was essential for networking with other trainers and learning new techniques. I didn't argue with her at first. I've seen how passionate she is about fitness, and if it helped her career, I was supportive. I didn't want to be the insecure husband who doubts his wife's intentions. But it wasn't just about work. She began spending an unusual amount of time on her phone, always smiling at messages she wouldn't share, staying up late texting in bed, and making vague comments like, "You wouldn't get it, John, it's just fitness stuff." She also became obsessed with her appearance, way more than usual. I'd catch her in front of the mirror, changing outfits multiple times before her so-called workouts. She'd spend hours picking out the perfect sports bras and leggings, then pack her bags meticulously for these weekend trips. It was like she was getting ready for a date. And whenever I'd try to kiss her goodbye, she'd dodge it, mumbling about how she didn't want to ruin her lipstick or smudge her makeup. It wasn't just physical changes either. Emily became really secretive about her schedule. She started dodging family gatherings, skipping out on things she used to love, like our movie nights and Sunday morning breakfasts with the kids. Whenever I brought up how she seemed so distant, she'd turn it back on me saying, "Maybe if you were more supportive, I'd feel like spending more time with you." It was like she was blaming me for something, but I didn't know what. Then one Friday night, she told me she had to go to a workout session that would last till midnight. Midnight? Who works out that late? Still, I let it slide. But after she left, I walked into the bathroom and saw her smartwatch on the counter. Normally, Emily was glued to that thing, always checking her steps, heart rate, and calorie count. So why leave it behind for such an important workout? Curious, I picked it up and started scrolling through her recent activity logs. I'm not proud of it, but I needed to know. What I found made my stomach drop. The heart rate data was strange. Every time she'd go on these sessions, it would spike way beyond what you'd expect from a regular workout. And the duration? Just 15 or 20 minutes, sometimes less. The GPS showed her moving to different locations, places that were nowhere near any gym or fitness center I knew of. Once, it even showed her at some upscale neighborhood, not far from where a new luxury hotel had opened. I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe the GPS was wrong. Maybe the spikes in her heart rate were from intense cardio. But it didn't add up. My brain kept screaming at me that something was very wrong. I didn't want to accuse her without proof, so I decided to take things a step further. The next day, I installed a tracking app on her phone. I felt dirty doing it, but I needed to know. If I didn't, it would eat me alive. The app let me see where she was going in real time, and when she wasn't around, I could pull up her messages and call logs. That weekend, She told me she was heading off to one of those retreats again. I kissed her goodbye, and she barely returned it, rushing out the door like she couldn't get away from me fast enough. I watched as the app showed her heading straight to that same luxury hotel. And guess what? Her personal trainer, Jason, posted an Instagram story from the same place. My heart sank, but I still needed to be absolutely sure before I confronted her. So I did something a little crazy. I booked a room at the same hotel for her next retreat. I was going to be there in person, and I was going to find out exactly what was going on. The following weekend, I packed a small bag and headed to the hotel Emily's GPS had pointed to. I made up an excuse about visiting an old friend for the weekend and left the kids with my sister. Emily barely noticed when I left. She was too busy getting ready for her fitness retreat. She even hummed a tune as she packed her duffel bag, which was unusual for someone who'd been claiming exhaustion for weeks. I got to the hotel late Friday evening, checked in, and positioned myself in a quiet corner of the lobby. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like everyone around me could hear it. I hadn't told a soul about what I was doing, not even my closest friend. I needed to see for myself. Around 8 p.m., she walked through the entrance, dressed in casual leggings and a loose hoodie. She didn't look like someone gearing up for a fitness retreat. Emily always wore those flashy new workout outfits she'd been buying recently, bright colors, matching sets. But today, she was dressed down. That was my first clue that I'd done the right thing by coming here. I kept my head down and tried not to look too obvious. She scanned the lobby, glanced at her phone, and walked over to the elevator bank. I waited a few seconds and then followed her at a safe distance. When the elevator doors closed behind her, I checked the floor indicator. She went to the 6th floor. I counted to 10 and then called another elevator. As I stepped out on the 6th floor, I saw her turn down a hallway, room key in hand. She didn't knock or hesitate. She swiped her key card, pushed the door open, and slipped inside. My blood went cold. This was it. I stood there, frozen in place, staring at the closed door from a distance. I didn't know how long I waited, maybe minutes, maybe an hour, but I finally worked up the nerve to approach. I raised my hand to knock, but then stopped. I could hear voices coming from inside, multiple voices. My ears strained to pick up what they were saying, but it was muffled. All I knew was that there were at least 4 or 5 people in there, including a couple of men. I was about to back away and leave. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions, maybe I was wrong. But then I thought about everything I'd seen and heard over the past few months. The secrecy, the lies, the constant texting, and the strange places she visited. I couldn't walk away now, so I knocked. I don't know what I expected. Maybe she'd open the door and have some reasonable explanation that would make me feel like an idiot for doubting her. But no, she didn't answer. The voices inside got quieter, and I knocked again, louder this time. Finally, the door cracked open, and Emily peeked out. The look of pure shock and horror on her face told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't expecting me to be there. She wasn't even prepared to cover up whatever was going on inside. "John, what are you doing here?" Her voice was shrill, panicked. "I could ask you the same thing," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mind if I come in?" She stammered something about it being a private event and tried to block the door, but I pushed past her. I wasn't going to let her weasel her way out of this. I stepped inside, and what I saw nearly knocked me off my feet. The room was dimly lit, and a thick, musky scent hung in the air. 3 other men were lounging around the room, none of them wearing more than sweatpants. They looked at me, then at Emily, then back at each other. There was no panic, no scrambling to explain, just a weird, calm silence, like I was the one who'd intruded. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, my voice barely controlled. I looked around the room, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Candles were scattered around, some kind of weird geometric symbols drawn on paper and taped to the walls. Bottles of wine and some snacks were on a table, but no one seemed to be eating or drinking. "John, you need to leave," Emily said in a firm voice, stepping in front of me. She'd gone from panic to angry in a matter of seconds. "This is a private meeting. You're not supposed to be here." "Meeting?" I practically laughed. "This is supposed to be your fitness retreat, right? Then why are you in a hotel room with—" I pointed to the men, them. One of the guys, a tall, bald man I recognized as Jason, her personal trainer, stepped forward. "Look, man, calm down. Emily didn't tell you about this because she knew you wouldn't understand. This is about energy exchange and spiritual growth." I blinked at him, not quite believing what I was hearing. "Energy exchange? Are you kidding me?" I turned back to Emily, who had her arms crossed defensively. "Emily, what's going on? Who are these guys?" "It's not what you think, John," she said, but she didn't sound convincing. "We're working on spiritual connections and healing practices. You're blowing this out of proportion." I almost laughed again. "Healing practices? Is that why you're spending the night in a hotel room with 3 men? John, you need to go. You're embarrassing me," she snapped, her voice rising. "You're making it sound so dirty, but you have no idea what this is about. It's about personal growth, about discovering parts of ourselves that society suppresses." "Society suppresses?" I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "You've been lying to me for months, sneaking out. And this is why? To be part of some weird group?" Emily looked at me like I was the crazy one. "John, if you'd just open your mind a little, you'd see that it's not about what you think it is. Jason's helping me tap into my energy channels and—" I cut her off, unable to listen to another word. "Are you sleeping with them, Emily?" She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. That tiny pause told me everything I needed to know. I felt like I'd been hit in the gut. "Emily," I repeated, softer this time. "Are you sleeping with them?" Her eyes darted to Jason and then back to me. "It's not like that. It's a form of energy exchange. It's not about being intimate." I wanted to scream. "It's not about being intimate? Are you kidding me? What kind of energy exchange happens in hotel rooms and involves taking off your clothes?" Her jaw tightened. "You wouldn't get it. You never do. You're so narrow-minded, John." I felt a wave of anger surge through me. "I don't get it? No, you're right. I don't get it. But I understand one thing. You've been lying to me for months. This is betrayal, Emily, no matter what fancy name you want to give it." She just glared at me, arms still crossed, chin raised defiantly. It was like she was daring me to do something. I didn't know what to do, so I turned and walked out, her voice trailing after me. "Go ahead, leave. You're not welcome here." I stumbled back to my room and collapsed on the bed, staring at the ceiling. What had I just witnessed? What had happened to the woman I married? I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay on the hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts that refused to settle. It was like I had stepped into some alternate universe where everything I thought I knew was flipped upside down. The Emily I confronted in that hotel room was a stranger, cold, defiant, and detached. I kept replaying her words over and over in my head. "You're so narrow-minded, John. It's about energy exchange." What did any of that even mean? I felt like an idiot for standing there, for even trying to understand what she was saying. She didn't seem remorseful, didn't even try to defend herself. Instead, she acted as if I was the one in the wrong for showing up unannounced. It wasn't just the infidelity that hurt, though God knows that was enough. It was the way she looked at me, like I was some sort of obstacle in her life. I kept wondering if I'd missed something, if this shift in her personality had been happening for longer than I realized. Had I been blind all this time, thinking we were just going through a rough patch? The next morning, I couldn't bring myself to eat. I just sat by the window, staring out at the parking lot below. I kept glancing at my phone, half expecting her to call or text. Maybe she'd come to her senses and apologize, or at least try to explain in a way that made sense. But nothing. Not a single message. It was like I didn't exist to her. When I finally left the hotel, I felt numb, like I was moving through a thick fog. I drove around aimlessly for a while before heading home. As soon as I walked through the front door, our daughter Madison ran up to me, excitedly asking how my weekend trip went. The guilt hit me like a punch to the stomach. Here I was, tangled in this mess of lies and deceit, while my kids had no idea their world was about to be turned upside down. I forced a smile, patted her on the head, and told her I'd missed her. Madison didn't seem to notice anything was wrong, but Alex, my 10-year-old, looked at me a little too closely, as if sensing something was off. "Is everything okay, Dad?" he asked, his voice soft. "Yeah, buddy, everything's fine," I lied. "Just a little tired, that's all." I barely managed to hold myself together that night. Emily came home late as expected, and acted like everything was perfectly normal. She breezed into the kitchen, greeted the kids, and started making herself some tea. There was no sign of guilt or discomfort on her face, just that same distant expression she'd had for the past few months. I waited until the kids were in bed before I confronted her again. I couldn't hold back any longer. "So, you're really not going to say anything?" I asked, leaning against the kitchen counter. She looked up from her mug, eyebrows raised. About what?" I repeated, incredulous. "About what I saw last night. About everything you've been doing behind my back." Emily sighed and set down her mug. "John, we've already been through this. You showed up uninvited to something you clearly don't understand. What do you want me to say? How about the truth?" I snapped, the frustration bubbling up. "Why have you been lying to me? Sneaking around, meeting other men in hotel rooms, and calling it some sort of spiritual whatever? What is wrong with you, Emily?" "Nothing's wrong with me," she shot back, crossing her arms defensively. "The only thing that's wrong is your refusal to see that I'm doing something positive for myself. It's not cheating, John. You don't understand what it means to truly connect with people on a deeper level." I stared at her, feeling a mix of anger and despair. "So, sleeping with other men is your idea of connecting on a deeper level?" She rolled her eyes. "For the last time, it's not about that. You're so obsessed with the physical part of it that you're missing the whole point." "Then help me understand," I said, my voice breaking. "Explain it to me, because right now it just looks like you're using this as an excuse to do whatever you want." "Fine," she said sharply. "If you really want to know, it's called energy alignment. It's about finding balance within yourself and sharing that balance with others. Jason introduced me to it months ago, and yes, it involves physical touch, but it's not what you think. It's about exchanging energy to help each other reach a higher state of being." I felt my jaw clench. "And how exactly does exchanging energy involve staying overnight in hotel rooms and keeping it all a secret?" Emily shrugged, like it was no big deal. "Because it's private. It's not something everyone would understand, and I didn't want to have to explain myself to you over and over again." I shook my head, struggling to process everything. "So, you just decided to lie to me instead? To your husband of 15 years. She sighed again, as if I were a child who just didn't get it. "I didn't want to hurt you, John. I knew you wouldn't understand. I was going to tell you eventually, but I needed time to figure out how." "Time," I repeated, incredulous. "Emily, you've been lying for months. This isn't about time. This is about trust, about our family. What do you expect me to do now? Just sit back and accept that my wife is sneaking off to do energy alignment with random men?" "They're not random men," she insisted, her tone cold. "They're part of the group. We've all committed to helping each other grow. And I don't see why you have to be so judgmental about it." "Judgmental?" I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "You're blaming me for being upset that you're sleeping around? What kind of twisted logic is that?" Emily's face tightened. "You know what? John, if you can't open your mind, then maybe you're right. Maybe we need to take a break. I don't want to be with someone who's going to hold me back from becoming the person I'm meant to be. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. Take a break? Are you serious? She nodded, her gaze unwavering. Yes, maybe we should separate for a while. Give each other some space to figure out what we really want. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, the mother of my children, and realized that she wasn't going to apologize or beg for forgiveness. She wasn't going to fight for our marriage. She wanted out. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the room was closing in on me as Emily casually suggested we take a break from our marriage. My mind spun in a million directions, and I struggled to find words that made any sense. Had I really just lost her like that? After 15 years of building a life together, raising our kids, and sharing dreams of our future, was she seriously willing to throw it all away for some bizarre energy exchange nonsense? What about Madison and Alex? I finally managed to say, my voice hoarse. What about the family we built? Are you really going to throw that away over this, whatever this is? Emily's expression softened slightly, but it wasn't the sympathy I was hoping for. It was pity. John, I'm not trying to hurt the kids. I love them, and I always will. But they need a mother who's happy and fulfilled. I can't be that person if I'm constantly pretending to be someone I'm not. So what then? I asked, throwing up my hands. You move out, join your group full-time, and show up for weekend visits like some part-time parent? Is that really what you want? I don't know, she admitted, looking away. I just need space to figure things out. Figure things out, I repeated, feeling the numbness creep back in. That's what you've been doing all this time, isn't it? Figuring things out with Jason and the rest of them. What about figuring us out? Emily, what about our marriage? John, I'm not the same person I was when we got married, she said softly. I've changed. People change. I've found something that makes me feel alive in ways I never have before. I wish you could understand that. I shook my head slowly. You don't even see it, do you? You don't see how twisted all of this sounds. She sighed and turned away, as if the conversation was already over. I can't keep having the same argument with you, John. I've made up my mind. So, that's it, I asked, the desperation clear in my voice. You're just going to walk away from me, from us, for something that isn't even real? You'd rather throw away our life together than give me a chance to understand. Emily's shoulders sagged, and she rubbed her temples like she had a headache. This isn't something you can just understand in a day or two. It's a journey I've been on for months. You weren't there. You didn't see how miserable I was before. This has helped me. I'm sorry. But I need to be true to myself. True to yourself, I echoed bitterly. You know, I always thought we'd be honest with each other no matter what. That's what I believed in. But I guess that was one-sided. She glanced back at me, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw something like regret in her eyes. But then she straightened up, her expression hardening. I think it's best if I stay with a friend for a few days. We both need time to process this. Let's not make any decisions right now. I wanted to scream at her, to beg her to stay and work things out. But I knew it wouldn't matter. She'd already made up her mind. I watched her walk down the hallway and disappear into our bedroom. I heard drawers opening and closing, the sound of a suitcase being unzipped. It was all so surreal. How had we gone from being a happy family to this nightmare in the span of a few hours? She came out 10 minutes later with a small suitcase and a backpack slung over her shoulder. She paused by the front door, looking back at me as if waiting for some final word. But I couldn't speak. I just stood there, feeling like my whole world was crumbling around me. Tell the kids I'll call them tomorrow, she said quietly. I nodded stiffly, and without another word, she walked out the door. I watched through the window as she got into her car and drove away, the taillights fading into the distance until she was gone. When the silence settled around me, I finally allowed myself to fall apart. I sank onto the couch, my face buried in my hands, and let out a broken sob. How had it come to this? What had I done wrong? I replayed every argument, every late night she spent away, every moment I had brushed off as normal. Had I been blind, or was she just that good at hiding it? I stayed like that for hours, trying to piece together how my life had unraveled so quickly. I wanted to blame her, to hate her for what she'd done, but a part of me still clung to the hope that this was all a bad dream, that she'd come back through the door any second, apologize, and tell me she wanted to make things right. But she didn't. Instead, I was left alone to break the news to our kids the next morning. I tried to keep it vague. Mommy needs a little time to herself, so she's staying with a friend for a few days, but I could see the confusion and fear in their eyes. They peppered me with questions, asking if they'd done something wrong, if Mommy was mad at them. No, it's nothing like that, I assured them, swallowing back the lump in my throat. Mommy and I just need to talk about some things, that's all. Everything's going to be okay. They didn't look convinced. Honestly, I wasn't convinced either. That evening, Emily called, as promised. Madison talked to her first, babbling about her day at school, but I could see her glancing at me every few seconds, searching for reassurance. When Alex got on the phone, he was quiet, just listening to whatever Emily was saying on the other end. I couldn't hear her words, but I knew that soft, soothing tone, the one she used to calm them down whenever they got upset. After they hung up, they both looked at me expectantly. "Is Mommy coming home soon?" Madison asked, her voice small and hopeful. "I don't know," I admitted, feeling like a failure for not having a better answer. "But I promise I'll do everything I can to make sure we stay together as a family." That seemed to satisfy them for the moment, but I knew I was only buying time. Emily wasn't coming back anytime soon. She was off on some spiritual journey that didn't include us. I didn't know how to fix it, how to bring her back to reality. For the next few days, we kept up this charade of normalcy. Emily would call every evening to talk to the kids, but she never asked to speak to me. It was like I was already being phased out of her life. One night, after the kids were asleep, I decided I couldn't wait around anymore. I needed answers. I sat down with my laptop and started researching everything I could about energy alignment and these kinds of so-called spiritual groups. What I found was disturbing. Most of these groups preyed on vulnerable people, promising enlightenment and personal growth, while slowly indoctrinating them into a cult-like mentality. They pushed for emotional and physical connections that went far beyond the normal boundaries of friendship or even marriage. Members were encouraged to detach from their previous lives, to see their families as obstacles to their true self. It was all manipulation, wrapped up in feel-good language that made it sound like something positive. The more I read, the more I realized that Emily wasn't just cheating. She was being pulled into something much darker. Something that could destroy not just our marriage, but her relationship with our kids, too. That's when I made up my mind. I wasn't going to let her get sucked in any deeper. I had to try to bring her back no matter what it took. I reached out to her parents, hoping they'd understand and offer some support. But they were just as clueless as I was. They hadn't even known about her so-called retreats. I knew I needed more help. Someone who specialized in dealing with this kind of thing. But who? I didn't even know where to start. After hours of scouring the internet, I found a small support group online for people who'd lost loved ones to manipulative spiritual organizations and cult-like groups. I posted a long message about what had been happening with Emily, explaining everything I'd seen and how her behavior had changed over the last year. I was half expecting no response, maybe just a few pity comments from strangers who couldn't really help. But within a few hours, I received a message from someone named Laura. She introduced herself as a therapist who specialized in helping people caught up in these types of situations. I felt a sliver of hope for the first time since Emily walked out the door. We scheduled a call, and when I told her everything, Laura didn't sound surprised. "It's more common than you think, John," she said softly. "People who get involved in these groups often feel like they've discovered some deep, hidden truth that no one else can understand. It becomes addictive, and they start to see everyone outside the group as an outsider or an enemy." "That's exactly how she's been acting," I replied, my voice breaking. Like I'm the one holding her back from something important, because that's what she's been told, Laura explained. "The more isolated she feels from you, the more dependent she'll become on the group for validation and support. It's a classic tactic. What we need to do is help her reconnect with her old life, her kids, her friends, the person she used to be before all this started." "How do I do that?" I asked, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. She's not listening to anything I say. It's like talking to a wall. "You can't force her to come back, John," Laura said gently, "but you can create opportunities for her to remember what she's missing. I'll help you come up with a plan. It's going to take time and a lot of patience." "Are you prepared for that?" "Yes," I answered without hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes." Laura gave me a list of steps to follow, small, practical things to start with. First, I had to reestablish some sort of communication with Emily, even if it was just casual. If I pressured her too much or demanded she come home, she'd push back even harder. I had to be careful, patient. I texted her the next day, keeping it light. Just a simple, "Hey, I hope you're doing okay. The kids miss you." It took her hours to respond, and when she did, it was short and cold. "I'm fine. Tell them I love them." Not exactly a breakthrough, but it was a start. Over the next week, I kept reaching out, small texts here and there, updates about Madison's basketball game, or how Alex was building a robot out of Legos. She barely responded, but I kept at it, trying not to sound desperate. Eventually, she started replying with a little more than just "okay" or "thanks." Then, out of the blue, she called one evening. I nearly dropped the phone when I saw her name on the screen. "John," she said, her voice quiet. "We need to talk." My heart leapt, but I tried to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, of course. I'm listening." "I don't think this break is enough," she said softly. "I think we need to take more serious steps, like separation. I don't want to make this messy, but I also don't want to live a lie anymore." It was like a punch to the gut. I had been making small progress, or so I thought, and now this. "Emily, please don't do this. I know things have been tough, but we can work through it." She sighed, the sound full of weariness. "John, I don't know if I want to work through it. I feel like we're living in two different worlds. What about the kids?" I asked desperately. "What about our family?" There was a long pause on the other end, and I could almost hear her wavering. "That's why I'm not rushing into anything," she said finally. "I just think we need more distance." "Distance isn't going to fix this," I insisted. "It's only going to make things worse. You're pulling away from the people who care about you. And for what? This group? This energy alignment? I don't even know what that means." "You don't have to understand," she said, her tone turning defensive again. "But you do have to respect it." "Emily, I do respect you," I said, struggling to stay calm. "I respect you enough to try to understand what's going on and to support you, even if I don't get it. But you're making it impossible for me to be there for you when you keep shutting me out." She didn't respond right away. I could hear her breathing on the other end, as if she was holding something back. "I have to go," she said abruptly. "Wait, Emily, please," I started, but the line went dead. I stared at the phone, a sense of helplessness washing over me. It was like watching her drift further and further away, and no matter how hard I tried to reach out, she kept slipping through my fingers. The next few days were a blur. I barely slept, my mind consumed with trying to figure out what to do next. I couldn't just sit around and wait for her to file for divorce. I had to act, to find a way to get her out of this mess. I called Laura again and told her everything. She listened patiently and then suggested we try something more direct, a way to remind Emily of the things she cared about outside of the group. Invite her to something she used to love, Laura suggested. Something that's just about the two of you. It doesn't have to be romantic or heavy, just familiar. It was a good idea, but I wasn't sure if Emily would even go for it. She seemed so determined to cut herself off from anything that tied her to her old life. But I had to try. That evening, I texted her, "Remember that Italian place downtown we used to go to? The one with the amazing lasagna? I'm going there on Friday. I'd love it if you'd join me. No pressure, just dinner." I hit send and waited, my heart pounding. I didn't expect a response. Maybe she'd ignore it or come up with an excuse like she always did. But to my surprise, she texted back almost immediately. "Okay, I'll think about it." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. I latched onto that tiny sliver of hope and spent the next few days preparing myself for Friday. I was determined to make it work, to remind her of what we used to have. When Friday finally rolled around, I got to the restaurant early and waited. Every time the door opened, my head snapped up, hoping to see her walk through. And then she did. Emily looked different. She was still beautiful, of course, but there was something guarded in her eyes, like she was already bracing herself for a fight. She walked over to the table slowly, her expression unreadable. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Hey," she replied, sliding into the seat across from me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stared at each other, the silence heavy with unspoken words. "Thank you for coming," I said quietly. She nodded, glancing around the familiar surroundings. "It's been a long time." "Yeah," I agreed. "Too long." She looked down at the menu, but I could see her hands trembling slightly. "John, I don't know if this is a good idea." "Emily, please, just give me one night," I interrupted gently. "One night to remember what it used to be like before all this. No arguments, no accusations, just dinner." She hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Okay, one night." We spent the next hour talking about everything but our problems. I told her funny stories about the kids, and she actually laughed, a real laugh, the kind that made my heart ache with nostalgia. For a little while, it felt like the old Emily was back, the one who used to light up whenever I made her smile. But as the night wore on, I could see her retreating again, pulling back into herself. When the check came, she glanced at her phone and said, "I should go." "Wait," I said, reaching across the table to stop her. "Emily, I know you think this group is what you need right now, but they're just telling you what you want to hear. They're not giving you anything real." "I am. The kids are. We're real. And we need you." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she shook her head. "I need to figure out who I am without being someone's wife or mother. I can't be that person right now. Emily, please." But she was already standing up, her expression shutting down. "Good night, John." And with that, she walked away again, leaving me alone in the restaurant with a half-eaten plate of lasagna and a heart full of shattered hopes. Weeks turned into months, and the emotional roller coaster of holding on and letting go wore me down to the core. The dinner that night was the last time Emily and I sat face to face. After that, she withdrew entirely. No more texts, no more calls, and she barely showed up for her weekly visits with the kids. It was as if she was slowly erasing herself from our lives, leaving behind an empty space that used to be filled with her presence. She finally called one morning and told me she'd made her decision. She was officially moving out. It felt like a dagger to the heart, but I had no energy left to argue. Emily didn't ask for custody of the kids, saying it would be unfair to disrupt their lives further. I wanted to scream at her for thinking she was doing us a favor, but I bit my tongue. She had made her choice, and no amount of pleading or reason could change that. So I agreed. I agreed to end a marriage that spanned 15 years, to unravel everything we'd built, and to start over on my own. Our divorce was finalized without any drama. Emily didn't want the house or the cars, just a clean break. She even turned down spousal support. The only thing she took was a few personal items and some old photographs, as if she needed to hold on to pieces of our past while stepping into her new reality. When the papers were signed and the judge announced our divorce, I felt a strange sense of relief, mixed with overwhelming sadness. I watched Emily leave the courtroom, her posture straight, her gaze forward, not looking back even once. And I realized that the woman I loved was truly gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. Life after Emily was a blur at first. There were nights I sat in our empty bedroom, staring at the spot where she used to sleep, and wondering how everything had fallen apart so quickly. The kids asked about her every now and then, Madison especially. She'd pick up her phone to call Emily, only to put it back down with a frown, like she was afraid of what she might hear. But gradually, things started to change. I focused on giving the kids as much stability and love as I could. We fell into a new routine, filling our weekends with board games, movie marathons, and visits to the local park. It wasn't the same, but it was ours, and I clung to that. Emily's contact with the kids dwindled. The calls became shorter and less frequent, and she never followed through on her promises to visit. I kept making excuses for her absence, until one day, Madison interrupted me. "Dad, you don't have to pretend anymore," she said quietly. "Mom's not coming back, is she?" I looked at her, this young girl who was growing up too fast, and my heart broke all over again. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I don't know if she is..." Madison nodded, a sad but accepting smile on her lips. "It's okay, Dad. I still have you and Alex." And just like that, I realized that the worst was over. I'd lost Emily, but I hadn't lost my family. Madison and Alex needed me more than ever, and I wasn't going to let them down. In the following months, I made a conscious effort to rebuild my life. I reached out to friends and family I hadn't seen in years, mended old relationships, and started going to therapy. It helped little by little. The wounds didn't close overnight, but they began to heal. I heard from Emily only once after our divorce. She called to tell me she was moving to the West Coast to start fresh. She was joining a new group, one that was deeper and more aligned with her energy. I listened in silence as she explained, her voice full of excitement and conviction. "John, I'm finally where I'm supposed to be," she said softly, almost like an apology. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Emily," I replied, and I meant it. Because deep down, I knew that the Emily I'd fallen in love with was gone. She'd been replaced by someone else, someone I couldn't reach, no matter how hard I tried. I hung up, feeling a strange sense of peace. She was gone, truly gone, but I wasn't shattered anymore. I was ready to move forward. It's been a year since that call. Emily hasn't reached out again, and I don't know if she ever will. The kids have adjusted, though Madison still struggles sometimes. I do my best to fill the gaps Emily left behind, but I know I can't be both parents, and that's okay. We're making it work. I've even started dating again, slowly, cautiously. It's strange to open myself up to someone new, but it feels good, too. It feels like hope. So here's my advice to anyone who's stuck in a situation like mine. Don't ignore the signs of change in your partner, no matter how subtle. It might be more than just a phase. And if you find yourself losing someone to something you can't understand, remember that it's not always your fault. People change, sometimes in ways you can't control. You can't force them to stay. You can only be there for them. And when they decide to walk away, let them go. As much as it hurt, letting go was what saved me. I focused on myself and my kids rebuilt my life piece by piece, and learned to live again. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not bitter. I'm just free. And sometimes that's the best you can hope for.